Hello everyone. It's been a very long time since you would have seen an episode of Truth Shots with Kapil. I have been missing in action as far as Truth Shots is concerned. It was because the team that was managing it was missing. I first want to thank everybody who has contacted me and has urged me over the last few weeks and a few months to come back and restart Truth Shots with Kapil. Thank you so much. So here we are, back with what I'm calling as season 2. We are not going to put a restriction this time of a specific time, but we will continue to come up with interesting topics, interesting discussions, and give you point of views to consider that may not necessarily match with your personal thoughts or what you are seeing in mainstream media at that point of time. So today we are going to talk about Canada. So there is a very interesting game that is being played in Canada. I'm calling it interesting, but a very dangerous game at the same time as well. What is going on is a group of people started protesting in Canada against the COVID restrictions. Now, the question is it right? Is it wrong? And the government then came back and government imposed emergency. For those that want to really look at it, specifically my audiences from India, think of it like what happened in 1975. This is an emergency. An emergency meaning special powers are being provided to the government to deal with any and all situations above and beyond what they might be able to do otherwise. Human rights, freedom, liberty, and the security and safety all comes within the purview of the government, and they can do as they please. Now, I am not suggesting somebody is going to become Sanjay Gandhi or somebody is going to become Indira Gandhi, as the case was in India. But that's really what emergency means. So it's not a small occasion. It's a momentous change. It's something that probably nobody thought could almost ever happen in Canada. But here we are. Now, what's the reason for this emergency? Well, the reason is there are some protests that are going on. The protests, while the reason for the protest is fine, they are going on because people want to protest against the COVID restrictions that they find too harsh. Let me not sit here and say whether those conditions are too harsh or not. I mean, in my point of view, yes, I have always been in favor of providing more luxury, more ability, more freedom for people to decide what they do with COVID, specifically under the current scenario when it has been proven beyond any doubt that vaccination or not only makes a difference in whether the person receiving the vaccination will fall very sick or mildly sick. It doesn't change the ability for people to contract COVID, neither does it change the ability of people to transmit COVID. So it should be a matter of choice versus the quarantines and everything that are going on. However, let me stick and assume what the government was doing was right. In that case, are the protests legal? Everybody keeps talking about non-violent protests. And everybody keeps pointing out to, this one gentleman called Mahatma Gandhi when they talk about such protests. Now, I am a huge follower of what Gandhiji said, which is non-violent protests, which is civic protests, which is you coming up and saying, I will not participate in the functioning of the government and I am going to go away or separate from whatever functioning I was doing earlier. That is non-violent protest, and I absolutely agree with that. However, I am going to say the same thing, put the same point of view that I had put across last year when the farmers' protest was happening in New Delhi, in India. The problem with these protests is these are not non-violent protests. Non-violent protests are done by people, and it is those people who are giving away their freedom, their right, or who are giving away whatever work they were doing. To the extent that any non-violent protest or any protest which is not breaking things or not killing people or not being violent, any such protest to the extent that it infringes on the freedom of any third person, it becomes violent in my opinion. That is exactly what I said about the farmers' protest in India last year, and that is exactly what I'm saying about the protests that are going on in Canada. It is fine for the truckers to say, we will not travel to US, we will not come back to Canada, we are not going to do anything. It's a civic protest, and absolutely it will be a civic protest. To the extent that the truckers choose to block roads, choose to block highways, choose to have protests in cities that are inconveniencing other people, it's a problem. Because they are not choosing for themselves only. These truckers are choosing for everybody. And they are fighting for freedom. How can you fight for freedom by infringing on other people's freedom? And that's really the crux of where I think what is happening with this rally is going wrong. I'm fine. I will fully support a rally that they do where they say we will not work. It's a civic protest, but you cannot inconvenience others. And that's really the where I see Canada needing to do more, or the protesters needing to get covered. So in that sense, the government absolutely need to cut that. What I find interesting is instead of coming up with certain specific attributes that the government could do, they came up with this wholesale emergency powers. It's a huge challenge. Okay, I said this a couple of years back as well, and I will repeat this again today. Those in power, when given additional power, finds it extremely difficult to give it up. The fact that emergency has been put in, the fact that special power has been taken up by the government, they will find it extremely difficult to give up power. And that's where the government needs to be controlled. So on one side, I find the protests illegal, specifically in terms of how they are being done. On the other side, I find the government grossly wrong. They just cannot, should not be allowed to put such emergency measures. Having said that, there is this entire debate that is going on right now that says, where did they get their funding? How are they using those funds? And stuff like that. While all of that may be important, but I think to the context of what is really going on, it doesn't matter. Even if it is, QAnon conspiracy theorists, or, QAnon followers, the right wing, or even if it is the actual truckers, or even if it is some other violent elements who wants to do something, if it's a civic protest that doesn't inconvenience people, it should be allowed. If it's a protest that is inconveniencing people or by any means becoming violent, it should definitely be stopped. With that, I will love to hear back from you. I will love to get your point of view, and I will assure that we will keep coming back with such episodes of Truth Shots with Kapil, with some interesting topic, with something nice that is going on at this point of time. And we missed so much over the last 6 months. We didn't get a chance to talk about Australia and Djokovic. We did not get a chance to talk about a lot of other stuff. We so far haven't talked about Ukraine, which I assure you we will cover in one of these episodes. We haven't talked about the hijab debate that is going on in Karnataka, and amongst many other things. So we haven't talked about Ashneer Grover, which also something we should cover. So we'll keep coming back to you, keep giving you point of views that you may not necessarily hear at other places. And that's what Truth Shots with Kapil is all about. With that, we come to an end of this episode. See you. Have a nice day. Until next time, goodbye.